Om Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahe Tejasvinavaditamastu ma vidvishavahe. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So we completed last week one attains what one strives for. And this week, the last topic, dedicated efforts lead the seeker, even the unrighteous, to self-realization. So we're on the end of the last topic. So just bearing in mind, verse 28 was talking about the most poignant concept, the idea of you attach to the higher and you renounce the lower falls away, in fact. So you cannot detach from anything unless you've pitched up something higher. Nobody. You might want to, but unless you've got something higher, only then your mind's thoughts are directed to something higher, and the lower will slowly diminish, fall away. So in your practice of life, never mind if you're thinking about your spiritual evolution, but in any aspect of your practice, this holds true. An important concept to remember. So today, 29, 30, 31, we're to do. So dedicated efforts lead the seeker, even the unrighteous, to self-realization. So the unrighteous is one who has many desires. That's what it means. You know, we condemn people as good and bad. A good person has a little few less desires than a bad person. That's about it. Going in one direction or the other. That's about it. So here, this topic's indicating that you've got to put in efforts, no matter who you are, because we all want this truth, this happiness, this peace. So we all do different things. We all take on board different efforts to get there. So let's do if there's any question, we can go ahead, or let's move to the verse. Ash?
I was just thinking that, well, actually I struggle with it, but the unrighteous who still has a lot of desires, a lot of, greed and self-ego and so forth, how would they discover the self when they've got so much in front to tackle with? Which we have as well. I'm just trying to figure out how would that happen?
Okay, my question back to you is, somebody who's considered righteous, how do they discover the self? Has any one of you erased yourselves?
Can I reply back?
Anybody, doesn't matter. It's just
yeah. I mean, I was someone who's righteous is already on the path, I guess, in that direction. So they're already thinking of something other than, the ego self.
Appreciated. But my point is here, and it's coming, this whole portion, is the righteous person. Who is the righteous person is what you've got to question. And then you'll find out how the unrighteous person can go about it. Because they're not different so much. There's just a little element which is making it a little bit different. Everybody wants to fulfill desires, yes? So the question is, how do you do that? You see, and it's relative. From an absolute stance, everybody's unrighteous, if we ask this question. Yeah. So relatively speaking, your question is actually, how does somebody less than what I'm thinking about look at it? There's no disrespect. It's just it's the way we should think about it. We think that person's not as good as me, or there's somebody, we're making comparisons. In fact, we have to do that to move on ourselves to some degree. But as you evolve, there becomes no righteous, unrighteous, if you get what I mean. You dissolve it. It's just you. So your question is, how do you seek the self? But he's unraveling it here, righteous, unrighteous, etc., to make you think. What is that? Make you think. So let's go on to this verse, and then maybe we also, it will become very clear. Tim.
Thank Ash for her question. Perhaps the difference between the righteous and the unrighteous is we have moments when we are righteous, when we have that glimpse of the self. So as we move through our days and our weeks and our years, there are moments when we glimpse the self. And so perhaps that goes towards an answer to Ash's question.
But it's relative. Mm-hmm. So you see, all I'm saying is you have that moment and it makes sense to you. And that's what he's trying to get at. But to another person, what your moment is, not you personally and any one of us. For another person, what one's doing is unrighteous. It's relative. But so it comes back to you have to work upon yourself and judge it, make those distinctions for yourself. You don't really know from somebody else's actions what they're doing or the direction. You may smile and yet be a villain. Says Shakespeare. It may seem good on the outside. In the inside, we don't know what's going on. Vice versa. It may seem bad on the outside, but inside, is your conscience working in a particular direction to purify your thoughts? That makes the difference. So I wouldn't worry about what others are doing. I'd worry about what oneself is doing, and that makes the difference on your spiritual path in a bigger picture. Others will always do what they need to do. You need to do what you need to do. That's really important. Makes sense. Anybody else wants to add? Or Ash, you have anything? Let's go. 29.
समोऽहं सर्वभूतेषु न मे द्वेषोऽस्ति न प्रियः ये भजन्ति तु मां भक्त्या मयि ते तेषु चाप्यहम्.
Nishi, if you could read the verse. Thank you.
The same am I in all beings. There is none hateful or dear to me, but those who worship me with devotion, they are in me and I am also in them.
So, what's important, as we were just mentioning, is what makes the difference. As the title suggests, and as Ash mentioned, so the dedicated efforts leads the seeker, even the unrighteous, to self-realization. So what really is important is the direction you're heading. So he says, I'm the same in all beings. So it doesn't matter if you're the worst and worst of villains or the best and best of sages. The self is the same, samaha. So none is hateful or none is more dear. Though in other verses it seems contradictory, that if we look back, what he's trying to say is the self is the same. It's not affected by goods or bads. So what's going to make the difference in how you may get to it, perceive it, is the direction. There's no preferential relationship between a good or a bad. It's neutral factor. But if you remember in previous verses, in some verses he says, I'm not in them, they are in me, or they are in me, or vice versa. So we don't remember that. So we need to, in the context each time, think for ourselves. And the whole exercise of this knowledge is to get you to cultivate intellect and think. Ask questions, think independently. Question everything. I remember I had a student, 10-year-old, was asking questions at a very young age. What is God? Have you met God? He's asking. Have you met? How do you know it's a him or a her? You know, ask, curious. So we need to cultivate that curiosity in us. What's beyond this universe? Curious. Not so it's jignasu, like just for its sake, but curious to put you in a direction to explore. Scriptures and texts as such are like that, to explore the truth deliberately. And it's deliberately made contradictory. Why do you think it's deliberately made contradictory? It's not in this scripture, not in things like the Bhagavad Gita or Upanishads, it's contradictory. It's contradictory across the board. If you look in Christianity, it's contradictory. It's seemingly contradictory. I was just looking at something the other day, and a Christian piece totally contradictory. In actual fact, if you know the structure of the Upanishads, there's nothing contradictory in it. It's very systematic and logical. So who is it contradictory to? Who are these scriptures contradictory to sometimes? What do we mean? is. We say what's poison in the beginning is nectar in the end. What's nectar in the beginning is poison in the end. Sounds contradictory. If you have something and you gain pleasure from it, why should it be not great in the end? Okay, we know the concept, but what does it make us do? One minute he's saying Brahman's in all of us, the next minute saying he's not in any of us. Or previously he said that. What's it making us do, Tim?
It's helping to develop the intellect. If you're given a text which is contradictory, you have to think. It's blatantly inconsistent, so it forces you to think which of the two is right, or perhaps neither is right, or both are right, and can you hold a contradiction in a truth? So it's trying to open people up to reading the text in a more interactive way.
Mm. And what else, if you add on to what Tim has just said, what else is it doing? What do you think, Ash?
It sort of makes you think, where am I in that, which side am I? Am I on the the good or the bad? Would I have Krishna in me, or would he not be in me? Yeah, it makes you think about where you are.
So what's it doing? It's stretching the constructs for you to go beyond the what? No. Poison, nectar, nectar, poison. We haven't done that verse yet, chapter 18, but we sure mentioned it. Rajasic happiness. Nectar in the beginning, poison in the end. Sattvic happiness. Poison in the beginning, nectar in the end. It doesn't make sense initially. It doesn't make sense to one who expects something pleasurable to be pleasurable. Something which is not looking pleasurable, you don't, poisonous, you don't expect it to become that way. Nectarine in the end. So, and if you go along it and you understand it, and you can move yourself out of it, you get a different perspective beyond those opposites. Takes you out of comfort zone. Contradiction. Stretches you beyond the opposites. Beyond the extremities.
Does it bring in detachment? Just because if you're detached, you can look at it at a different view.
Yeah. So that's a product of it. You become objective. So say when you are, example, when you're with no criticism, but when you're unfit, it's poisonous to do exercise. When you become fit, it becomes easy to do it, and it's a pleasure. When you understand the spiritual path, you need to be fit to keep your mind not occupied on the body. So you're not concerned about whether it's nice or not nice. There's just need to keep your focus off the body, keep it on the intellect and moving in the conscience direction. So in that sense, you keep the body fit. Uncomfortable or comfortable, do it. Objective, you're detached from it. Just do it. Does it make sense? So, yes, you're right, Jyoti. It brings a sense of detachment, objectivity. What happens when you're objective to anything? It's a good position to be in, not a good position to be in. Yeah.
I think it's a good position to be in, objectivity. It, I think, probably brings in sense of priority and probably what and all those mandatory duties that we are supposed to perform. I think it helps to probably bring in clarity with the obligatory duties.
So makes it much better when you're objective. Just get on with it. You can actually put back when you're objective. Yes. Jyoti.
I think when you're objective, you focus on the things that you need to focus, and the other things just, as you say, wash away.
That's it. So this contradiction pushes and pulls you to see things beyond that perspective. The scriptures are designed like that. The human mind, if something's given to it too easily, it doesn't have to think about it. It feels it, understands it, and drops it, but it doesn't make a change. We need to be stretched. Yeah. That's what happens when you feel extremely fit physically. Then you realize you stop doing the things which make you fit if you're not objective, and you go back to square one and you go back up again. Probably the fitness industry and the food industry in that nature is a very big industry which is not going out of business because of our mind. But discipline makes us go. Wow. So the scriptures deliberately make you think, have contradiction. So Brahman is described in all sorts of different ways. Sometimes it's described in the Upanishad that it's near to you. Sometimes it's described that it's far from you. Sometimes it's described in a very gross form. In the next chapters or so, it's coming up. Vishvarupa Darshana, physical form. Sometimes it's described as subtle and beyond. Sometimes it's described within. Sometimes it's described without. Full of contradictions. In the Upanishads, it says, just when you think you know it, you don't know it. It's so frustrating. Just when you think you've got there, you've not got there. And when you don't think you've got there, he says you've got there. Puts you in somersaults. So the question, maybe did the seed come first or the tree come first? You know, it's trying to get you to unravel this. So here in this verse, unlike others, is saying, they are in me and I am in them. And previously he said contrary to that. So what do you think he means in this verse? Was he sleeping in the other times, but I'm not in them, or good morning. When, see, Ash's question is relevant here. When do you know when you are righteous? What's your thoughts on something? When you're unrighteous, Ash's question was like, you don't see it. How can you see it then? So when might it be that you may be able to conceive something like this? Jyoti?
When you're righteous.
Yes, but that's begging the question. Good. When you grow from a young child, from class 1, knowing 2 + 2, And then you become, in high school, 2 + 2 becomes very easy. You know it. You don't say 5, you understand, hopefully, 4 on the whole. And then it becomes more complicated in your calculations as you grow older, maybe in the school, percentages, fractions, etc., calculus, whatever. But when you're only know 2 + 2, you've only got that much information. But when you know that and you've got other information, you can look at things from a different perspective. So what have you been doing? Jyoti.
You've been expanding your knowledge. And your growth to understand more, and and you become more righteous from your understanding and knowledge.
So you've been taking on knowledge, which enables you to substantiate your thoughts, your thinking, which enables you to offer a distinction of direction, what you want to do or don't want to do. So if you're taking on this knowledge, it's not going to direct you to rob the bank unless you cultivate your gross intellect, where you will rob the bank very well. But it's designed for you to go inwards to cultivate your subtle intellect. But if it cultivates your gross intellect, you'll rob the bank extremely well and get away with it. That's what it's saying. So when you purify your desires, bit by bit by bit by bit, you get stronger and stronger. You get a bigger picture overall of where you stand. So your conscience is pricking more readily. So the self is more available in that sense. You can pitch your thoughts on something bigger. Otherwise, when you're unrighteous, it's very much more self-centered. That's all it is. Those are the difference. One's perpetual ego, the other one is a direction of something more universal. So Ash's question, well, how will the one with the ego know? They won't know until something knocks them sideways. And they might get a thought, what is this all about? But if that happens, they could escalate themselves far faster than the righteous. So it really doesn't matter. What matters is the direction you take it. So is your thoughts on the self, or is your thoughts on the identification of your body, mind, and intellect? If it's on the body, mind, and intellect, you've got to expect to suffer because things are transient. If it's on the self, you've always got a universal perspective to come to. So you can bypass it quickly. I am in you. Before it said I'm in them, then I'm in you. It is now saying summer, I'm in all of them. Good, bad, and different. Do you read the verse? Let's read the verse.
The fourth and last topic of the chapter covers verses 29 to 34. It reveals the path of evolution to all seekers, irrespective of their spiritual status. Even the unrighteous can reach the state of enlightenment through their devotion and dedicated effort. The self within acts as the conscious principle that enlivens all beings. The same self functions in the virtuous as well as the vicious people. It neither loves the virtuous nor hates the vicious. The self remains ever the dispassionate, disinterested, divine witness in being. In this verse, Krishna declares, those who worship me, self, with devotion, They are in me and I am in them. This statement seems to contradict his earlier declaration in verse 4. All beings are in me, but I am not in them. The apparent contradiction arises because Krishna addresses two different types of people. In verse 4, he speaks of persons riddled with desires. Where desires infest an individual, his inner self remains obscured. That explains why Krishna states he, self, does not exist in such persons. In this verse, he refers to persons who have exhausted their desires through devoted spiritual practices and revealed the self. To such purified souls, Krishna affirms, I, self, am in them.
So just one last thought. If you look out of your window right now, is the sun there? Is it cloudy or is it sunny outside your window? Anyone? Vijay, what do you think? You've got to put yourself on.
Yeah, it's not very cloudy and it's not sunny at all.
So anybody else on the weather forecast? We're allowed to discuss because we're in the UK.
It's cloudy here.
It's cloudy here.
But the sun's always there, isn't it? It's just that we don't see it.
So we do. Exactly. So the self is always there, but it's obscured by our desires, just as the sun is obscured by the cloud. When you understand it, you think, the sun is always there, the self is always there. But when you're not at that stage, you feel there is nothing good in this world. There's nothing beyond this. You can't see it because the desires are present. I need to fix my body, I need to fix my mind, I need to fix my intellect, I need to cater to those things. There isn't anything else. You can't perceive it. So in that sense, it's not there. Just a thought. Good.
Just reflecting on that statement, Parvati, I think I'm just thinking about, trying to connect it with Sattvic, Rajasic, and Tamasic. So it looks like, to me, the way I understand it is the sun by itself probably is more of a Sattvic quality. The amount of cloud that probably kind of shrouds the sun basically decides whether it is Tamasic or Rajasic qualities that probably people would have. I think the amount of desires probably are the ones which would define whether a personality would be a Tamasic or Rajasic. Would that be a right statement?
Reflect on it. You could make it an analogy like that, but the sun is neutral, meaning it will give heat to the cloud, and it will enable the cloud, and it will also enable the brightness. So it allows all the range of everything else. Sattvic, Rajasic, and Tamasic are Tamasic isn't existing because of sattva. Yeah. It's existing because of lack of sattva. So you could say if that's where your focus is, but the sattva's already there. These are just thought qualities we're cultivating. Trans-sattva, maybe you might say, is the sun. Maybe. We can't stretch the analogy we keep certain comparisons with parameters. But yeah, if it works for you, you've got to be pushing yourself in the direction of the conscious of something universal. Okay. So if that works for you to push you up, fine. Anybody else? Yes.
I'm just returning to Ash's opening question and your meteorological example of the sun and the clouds. We're very used to the clouds in England. It was May Day this morning. I went out for a very early morning walk, and there was an unusual mist. You couldn't see things, but it was unusual to have a mist, and it makes you ask yourself, what is it that I cannot see? And so perhaps Ash's first question is, it begs you to ask, what is it that I cannot see?
In which case, Guru, your thing in this context holds good. Tamasic, you can't see anything. Rajasic, you see the cloud. You identify the Sattvic as the sun. You can look at it that way. Yeah. So we're looking for something beyond what we perceive, feel, and think. Good. Let's go 29.
अपि चेत् सुदुराचारः भजते मामनन्यभाक् साधुरेव समन्तव्यः सम्यग् व्यवसितो हि सः.
Okay, so this is addressing the question in sense. Sam, if you could read the verse.
Verse 30. Even if a very wicked person worships me with unswerving devotion, he too shall be regarded as righteous indeed, for he has rightly resolved.
So it sounds contradictory, but it's that moment of change of direction for a person. So even if a wicked person worships me, so how can a wicked person, if they're full of desires, doesn't, with unswerving devotion, but there comes a point maybe that you get a knock or a shock and it catapults you. You've got a whole bundle of desires weighing you down, but suddenly something makes you take a different direction. Acharya, behavior and conduct. Dur Acharya, bad conduct. Sudur Acharya, very wicked fellow. Extremely wicked person. So even a Suduracharya can get it. The most wicked of wicked. So when one's really, you see something which you feel is extremely wicked, it just means that they've got unfulfilled desires en masse. That they'll do anything to get them fulfilled. But with unswerving devotion, devotion means, we define devotion to your thoughts are heading to something higher. It's an emotion. Love at the same level, devotion to something higher. You respect, you want to aspire for. So the question is, whoever you are, whatever you're doing, no matter whom, it doesn't matter. Everybody's got the self, that truth in them. What direction are you taking is the important thing. Not whether you are righteous, you got less, or whether you are a righteous person could start heading in the wrong direction. And you suddenly feel confident that you're on the right track and you become indulgent. An unrighteous person could start heading, for whatever the reason, in the other direction. The author of the Ramayana was who? Anybody? Who was the author? Guru.
Valmiki.
Valmiki. And who was Valmiki before he wrote the Ramayana? It's very famous.
Sorry, what is Ramayana?
Ramayana is an epic text like the Mahabharata, or the Bhagavad Gita is the kernel of the Mahabharata. So the Ramayana is another epic text like that. Same sort of thing. Very famous. So the author, like Vyasa, is the author of the Bhagavad Gita. The author of the Ramayana is Valmiki. Before Valmiki was the author of the Ramayana, what was his profession?
He was thief.
He was a thief. He was a highway robber. Many stories are like this in different cultures and religions. So he was a highway robber.
Harold, yeah, I just wanted to let you know that I think there's a rusty noise. I
Thank
just
you.
thought I'd let you know. Thank
So
you.
Valmiki was a highway robber. So what direction are you taking at? That's important. At any moment you can change. The self remains the same. So if you want to get to that truth, you just got to change the direction. You make that resolve to something higher with unswerving devotion. It's almost like anybody heard the story of the hare and the tortoise when we were kids. Does everybody know this story? The hare and the tortoise. Who's the faster of the hare and the tortoise? You know what a hare is, Sam?
Is it the story of the rabbit and the turtle? And
Probably.
I've heard of it before.
So similar thing. So a rabbit or a hare, hare's like a rabbit creature, is very fast. And the tortoise is very slow. So the hare was under the impression they had a race, and he was under the impression that he could win it anyway. So he takes a rest. And the tortoise slowly keeps going in the direction. Who wins the race? Does anybody remember? Jyoti?
The tortoise.
Yep. So it's like that. Keep putting in efforts, bit by bit by bit. Ma Suchaha, don't worry, you will get there. That's what he's trying to say. It doesn't matter who you are. But if you are thinking you're going to get there because you've all your righteous acts, you take a rest. Yeah, you'll get there, but not as fast as the tortoise. That's the point. So, what direction? So it takes disciplined activities to evolve on the spiritual path. You discipline your mind, you discipline your thoughts, you discipline the way you use your wealth, you discipline your physical activity, you discipline what you put in your body. When you don't, you will have a reaction and you have to put up with that. You discipline what you're thinking, negative thoughts, positive. Get it clear and channelize the energies towards something higher. You discipline giving, not taking. It escalates you. So even if you've got a debt, if you discipline yourself, you'll clear the debt and move forward. If you have no debts and become indulgent, you'll be full of debts. It's like that. The minute you light a candle in a dark room, the whole room becomes light. Yeah, you dispel that darkness. So the moment you worship the higher, you direct your thoughts to something more refined, more universal, with a different perspective. Even the worst of the worst we might condemn can be on that path. Tim?
Who was the author of the Bhagavad Gita before writing the Bhagavad Gita?
Do you mean before Vyasa? So it's like it was given as these values of Sanatana Dharma were given as word of mouth. In fact, they were just given out principles, and so nobody knows it's from time go. Nobody knows. It's a collection of sages, saints, of thought which has been handed down, word of mouth. There may be many people which are unsung and unknown. Just like Sankaracharya brought the Bhagavad Gita to the forefront to humanity to make it accessible. He wasn't the author, but he brought it forward. So we know this name, Adi Sankaracharya, but we don't know what was before that and before that. Collection of people with humility handed down that knowledge, word of mouth. And the author really, if you're a spiritual aspirant, becomes insignificant. Those values are what hold true. Who or what doesn't matter. But it's helpful, we got the story of Valmiki in terms of the Ramayana. It shows you can change your direction. And there are many, many stories in Shakespeare and various other places. I think it was Henry V, I'm not sure, I'm not quoting correctly, who was similarly turned his life around as such. So I don't know who the author was. Universal values don't have any author in the end. They're truth. Don't belong to anyone, belong to everyone. It's in the Christian Old Testament, in the beginning was the word. Is that right? Where did that word come from? So everybody from the time go, literature and language are various ways we can take it in, but it's limited. So there must have been something before that. So we don't know. We're just privileged to have this to know something more and move on our path. 31. Let's read the commentary 30.
The Bhagavad Gita presents a practical philosophy with universal application in all periods of time. It offers solutions and guides the lives of both the virtuous and the vicious. It comforts the variety of persons who seek its guidance. Hence, the Gita is adored as a mother. In the spiritual field, your present status is not as important as the direction, the course of your action. Are you led away by the worldly attractions or drawn towards the eternal truth? A person claiming a spiritual status may yield to the tantalizing sense objects and run after mundane pleasures, whereas another without a spiritual background may seek the higher truths of life. The verse states that even a very wicked person who begins to seek the Supreme Self with unswerving devotion becomes righteous. He has rightly resolved. His path of action will lead him to the ultimate goal of human existence. Imagine an unexplored cave plunged in dense darkness from time immemorial. It has never seen light, but the moment you strike a light, the cave becomes instantly illumined. Likewise, the length and depth of your ignorance does not matter as long as you resolve to change your path to truth. The moment you commence your spiritual path, your ignorance recedes before the light of yourself. The verse extols even a wicked person who has resolved to pursue the self.
So just one thought on this is that if you are totally egoistic, you get the knocks and shocks of life. You may increase your ego to get more knocks and shocks of life. It seems initially pleasurable, but you get heavier knocks and shocks of life. So when you get jolted, if something clicks in your mind, if there's a possibility, when you get really knocked, something clicks, there's got to be something else. May have to be that far before you can see something. You may not even be able to hold it because of the desires. This answer to Ash's question. But if we're a combination of goods and bads. If there's something which can click and you gain some position of knowledge, of intellect, a little bit even to maneuver yourself, may start you on that right direction. It may not. Also, you may have to finish yourself off before that happens. So if you're not in that position, a little bit more privileged than the other, that's all. On that, shall we don't have time for 31. Okay. Everyone.
Thank you, Parijit.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Thank you.